Welcome back. All right, so I'll be doing a news of the day video at some point today, probably right after I put this video up. But I put together a madness board today. Now I qualified as madness based on the amount of magnets on the board. So we're at 35. It qualifies as madness to me. Magnet madness. So the draft is the topic of conversation for this video for a simple reason. Tampa Bay yesterday trades a bunch of draft picks for Tanner Jeannot. And I think that's a great haul for Nashville. Julien BriseBois comes out today and says what the analytics community's been saying for years, that draft picks are overvalued. And he's not entirely wrong on this either. We'll hear talk about, well, Kaprizov was a fifth rounder. Well, Kucherov was a 58th overall pick. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. So, yes, there are guys who get taken late who end up being pretty good. It is not a coincidence that very often they're European players. Very often they might end up being Russian players. We've seen where drafts where guys will fall in the draft because GMs are like, well, I need a guy now. So I would draft this guy at 15, but he's probably not going to come over for 3 years. So I'm going to draft this guy out of the Canadian juniors because I know he'll come in and play for me right now. It's short-sighted, but there's GMs that do that. So, looking all the way back to the 2012 draft, and I've got 7 drafts on this board, and then we'll get into the 8 over here, because I think there's really a point to be made in what Julien BriseBois is saying, right? So, 2012, the number 1 point producer from that draft is Filip Forsberg, who was drafted 11th overall by the Washington Capitals. Now, the 2012 draft is kind of not one that's considered to have been great, but still, the number 2 point producer, Tomas Hertl, plays for San Jose. Number 3 points producer, Morgan Rielly, plays for Toronto. Teuvo Teravainen was traded to Chicago along with a cap dump because they had to get cap space. And Alex Galchenyuk is still 5th on that draft, which, yes, does show that the 2012 draft was not a fantastic draft. But look at this, 11, 17, 5, 18, and 3. So your top 5 point producers from that draft, all in the top 18 of that draft. So for GMs that trade out of the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, it might be a smart move. Let's look at 2013. Nathan MacKinnon's the number 1 point producer from that draft. He's number 1 in that draft. Sasha Barkov was number 2 in that draft. He's the number 2 point producer. Elias Lindholm, the number 5 draft pick for Carolina, is the number 3 point producer. Sean Monahan, the number 6 draft pick, is the number 4 point producer. And Bo Horvat, drafted number 9 overall for Vancouver, in a trade with Corey Schneider from New Jersey, ends up being number 5. So that's a solid list, and all of them are in the top 9. So your top 5 points producers are all top 9 draft picks. This is why when we talk about the draft and there's always, well, this guy could be a bust. It normally doesn't happen. 2012 will get brought up because there was fail for Nail. Nail Yakupov was going to be a star, and he had a couple of really nice goals for the Oilers during his rookie year. But in the end, he doesn't last very long in the NHL, right? But we get to 2014, you got the number 3 pick, the Edmonton Oilers draft Leon Draisaitl. He's the number 1 point producer from that draft class. David Pastrnak, drafted 25th overall by Boston, is number 2. Brayden Point, so I'm wearing Tampa for that reason too. At number 79, that is the lowest ranked pick that ends up showing up on this part of the board. Drafted by Tampa Bay at 79th. Very astute pick. Sam Reinhart was drafted 2nd. He is number 4 on the board. And Dylan Larkin, number 15 in the draft that year. He's number 5. So Detroit, smart pick there. And so you've got 3, 25, 79, 2, and 15. So you've got 1 outside the first round. And that's really the key here. So if the argument's going to be made that, well, Tanner Jeannot isn't worth all of that, one thing that was said by Julien BriseBois is what are the odds of those, and kind of he insinuated, what are the odds of those draft picks turning into a Tanner Jeannot? And then when that guy develops into a Tanner Jeannot, is the team that he has right now going to still be together? And the answer is no. You have to strike while the iron's hot. 2015, the number 1 pick that year, Connor McDavid, is the number 1 point producer from that draft class. Mitch Marner, drafted 4th overall, is 2nd. Mikko Rantanen was drafted 10th. He's 3rd on the list. Sebastian Aho, drafted 35th overall. He's 4th. Jack Eichel, number 2 in that draft. He is 5th on that production list. Now, that 2015 draft is ridiculous. And we'll get into that over here. The 2015 draft, the depth, the amount of star players that come out of that draft, absolutely ridiculous. And the 2023 draft is seen as having a similar look to it. The interesting part, too, is remember when the 2015 draft came around, obviously there was a hype around McDavid and Eichel, but it was said it was a pretty deep draft. This is going to be a pretty good draft. And then it became a substantially, I think it's been a better draft than even what it was hyped to be in 2015. 2016, the number one pick is number one on the board again. It's Austin Matthews. Then Matthew Tkachuk was drafted 6th overall. We don't have to talk about who went 5th that year. We just don't, because I've talked about it. But Calgary drafting 6th, we're very fortunate with who was taken before him, and they get Tkachuk at 6th. And he's number 2 on the board. Patrick Laine was the number 2 draft pick. He, of course, being drafted by Winnipeg, now in Columbus. Then you've got the number 39 pick, Alex DeBrincat, who slipped in that draft because of his size. He slipped out of the first round because he was seen as too small. And so that's why. So when I hear about, why was DeBrincat passed over and this team, everybody passed on DeBrincat in the first round. Chicago got a steal with him at 39, and then they traded him to Ottawa. Number 7 that year was Clayton Keller. He's number 5 on the board in terms of points production. Keller, I think, has really committed to his own. I think he's a really solid player for Arizona. A lot of hype there'd be a lot more hype for Keller if he didn't play in Arizona. 2017 draft, Elias Pettersson, number 5 pick that year, is the number 1 point producer. Nico Hischier, the number 1 draft pick, is the number 2 point producer. Cale Makar, he was drafted 4th overall. He's number 3 points producer. Robert Thomas was number 20. He is number 4 on the points production chart of things. Jason Robertson was drafted 39th overall by Dallas. So that's back-to-back years where draft pick number 39 creates an interesting situation. In that Robertson, I don't think it was his size that caused him to end up in the second round. It's just Dallas was smart enough to pick him up at 39th. He was still there. So that draft, again, you've got one outside the first round. 2016, one outside the first round. 2015, one outside the first round. And this is kind of a pattern. Your first round picks are really where your star players are going to be. 2018, the number 1 producer from that year, Andrei Svechnikov, he was a number 2 pick. Brady Tkachuk, the number 4 pick that year, ends up number 2 on the chart. Rasmus Dahlin was number 1. I remember the talk early on with Dahlin that this guy looks like a bust. I don't understand all the hype. I don't think he's worth it. He's not that good. He's pretty good. Quinn Hughes, number 7 pick that year for Vancouver. He's 4th on the board. And Joel Farabee's number 5. He was 14th overall that year in the draft. So, again, all of them are top draft picks. All of them are in the first round. And so this idea that if you trade out a 3rd or a 4th, that it's a significant piece that you might be getting back. I mean, it happens. Like, I had thought about going through the draft history or the trade history of the NHL and looking at all the draft picks that get traded. But I've done enough career videos to know that a lot of the time when I see a veteran get moved for a draft pick, that draft pick just doesn't reach the NHL. That's very common, that the draft pick, whether it's a 3rd or a 4th, wherever it is, usually doesn't make it to the NHL. So I wanted to look at the numbers. I looked it up online, and there's all kinds of articles, and I thought, no, let's just do this myself. I'm going to just do this myself because there's all kinds of articles, and I want to use somebody else's material. So I went through and I counted up who I believe to be NHL regulars. Now, NHL regulars is... It's definitely a subjective term. So for me to go through and count it, it may be a little bit different. And there were some where I thought, well, he was a regular for a while, for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, I'll count that as an NHL regular. In some cases he was, half a season here, half a season. I don't think so. But it still shows a pattern. So the first round is where you've got your best players. 2012, 21 of the 30 picks became regulars in the NHL. 21 in 2013, 21 in 2014. So your odds of getting a player who's not going to be regular in the NHL, I mean, that's around 30%. Then 2015, it's 24 players in that draft that ended up being regulars in the NHL. 2016, it's 23. 2017, it's 26. Worthy of note, that's when the draft goes to 31 players in the first round. 2018, it's 21, and 2019, it's 18. But again, with 2019, you have to remember there are some players drafted that year who still haven't made it to the NHL, who are still predicted to make it to the NHL. So there's that side of it as well, right? So that's your first round. 175 players in total, again, by my math, which means the average 21.875 players out of 30 or 31 end up being regulars in the NHL. If you're drafting in the first round, you should get a regular in the National Hockey League. You should not be picking somebody who doesn't make it. Then in the second round, that drop-off is steep. 9 in 2012, 9 in 2013, 10 in 2014, and then 2015, 17. So that's 41 of the top 60 picks in 2015 became regulars, again by my count. 16 in 2016, so that's a pretty good draft too. 14 in 2017, 8 in 2018, and 5 in 2019. Same caveat with 2019 for the second round. Some players are going to make it that haven't yet. 88 players in total, which means 11 on average. So that's a pretty steep drop-off. That you're looking at probably about 30% that end up being regulars in the NHL from 2012 to 2019. Again, with the 2019 asterisk, the asterisk being next to 2017, to remind myself that it went to 31 players that year. Then the third round, it was pretty good in 2012. 12 guys in the third round. Better than the second round. That kind of surprised me, but it doesn't stay that way. 7 in 2013, 7 in 2014, 5 in 2015, 3 in 2016, 4 in 2017, 3 in 2018, and only 1 so far from the 2019 draft class. So that's 42. So that's an average of 5.25 out of that third round ended up becoming regulars in the National Hockey League. So when we watch the draft and we get into the third round, there's guys that will say, he should be pretty good. This guy fell. I think they're going to regret letting this guy fall in the draft. Most often, I don't think they do. Fourth round, it does drop off a bit here, although there are some years where the fourth round's actually better than the third. So it's 6 in 2012, 6 in 2013, 8 in 2014, 6 in 2015, 4 in 2016, 7 in 2017, 2 in 2018, and 1 in 2019. So that's 40 in total, an average of 5. 5 out of 30 or 31 in that draft class ended up making it to the NHL as regulars. I'm not talking about just a game. I've seen charts where they say here are the odds of a player playing a game. Here's the odds of a player becoming a star. I didn't want to do the star part because that can be a little bit touchy, because what I consider to be a star player might not be what you consider to be a star player in the National Hockey League. And so that's where I just wanted to keep it simple of NHL regulars, which again, I got a little creative in that, especially when you get to the fifth round. And again, this is where Kirill Kaprizov's drafted, right? But in general, the fifth round is not where you find your star players. So in the fifth round in 2012, there were 4 that became regulars, 5 in 2013, 3 in 2014, 7 in 2015. So again, that 2015 draft is good all the way through. 0 in 2016, 2 in 2017, 2 in 2018, none in 2019 as of yet. So that's 23. So the average is 2.875. So yeah, fifth round picks in general. There was a video series I was doing too, where I was ranking draft picks, and I mean people will remember I've done this a couple of times where I rank number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to do fourth or fifth round picks and everything? And I looked it up and I went through all it, and I thought most of these guys that would make it to the top 20 of this list or top 10 of this list aren't really players of that much note, and I felt like it was a lot of work that I'd be doing to put a list together that it's not really that I felt that I could do other videos on something that would be more interesting and entertaining, I thought. So there you go. Then in the sixth round, things drop off again. So there were 4 in 2012 that became NHL regulars, 1 in 2013, 2 in 2014, 4 in 2015. Again, 2015, very good. 3 in 2016, 2 in 2017, and 1 each in 2018 and 2019. The total is 18 players, an average of 2.25. So once you get into that sixth round, odds are you're picking up somebody who's not going to be a regular. Many cases will not make it to the National Hockey League. Then you get to round 7, 0 in 2012, 5 in 2013. So 2013 was kind of an oddball. 2014, it's 4. 2015, it's 3. 0 from 2016, 2017, 2018. 2019, it's 1. So that total is 13 altogether, 1.63. So once we get to the seventh round of the draft, is part of the reason why now when we do the live stream on draft day, I don't worry so much about the later rounds of the draft, because odds are either you're looking at players that aren't going to make it, or if they do, it's going to take a while. Your guys that you draft later in the draft are going to be the ones that probably have problems with their skating, might be too small, might have issues with physicality. Maybe they're too shy. They're not going to be able to fight their way through NHL checking. And so they're going to end up probably in the AHL or the ECHL or maybe end up playing in Europe. So when you look at it, too, from this perspective, if you combine the two rounds, so 1, 2, you got 30, 30, 31, 41 in 2015, 39 in 2016, 40 in 2017, 29 in 2018, and again, 2019, 23. So you can see that's a lot of players. Third and fourth rounds, you got 18 in 2012, 13 in 2013, 15 in 2014, 11 in 2015. Deep draft. Once you get to rounds 3 and 4, it's not that different from the others. 2016, you're looking at 7 between those two rounds. 2017, you're looking at 11, which is high. Not as much as 2014 or 2012. It's odd because the 2012 draft gets a lot of flack, and I understand that like the guys at the top kind of failed, but there's still some good value in that draft as well. Then 2018, you've got 5, and again with 2019, you've got 2 so far from rounds 3 and 4. So when we talk about the haul that a team gets in a trade, and we talk about all these draft picks, and it's like, why are they giving away so many draft picks? This is why. Because they're looking and saying the odds of a guy we draft in the 4th round making to the NHL is not great. As whatever we do with our scouting is fine, but the gems that we used to see in the draft, Detroit was really good at finding those gems in the draft because they had better scouting in Europe than everybody else. That gap has narrowed. Most teams have very similar scouting reports. They might have different conclusions they reach in terms of which players they like more, but they'll have access to the same information. Those diamonds in the rough are still there, but they're not nearly as prominent in the NHL as they were back in the 80s and 90s when it wasn't quite as much of an even playing field. And with the salary cap, I think that's forced teams to have that amateur scouting. You can't just go out and buy a bunch of players now because you have a salary cap to worry about. You need guys on entry-level contracts. You need really good rookies coming in too, and that's where you need to have your amateur scouting right up with everybody else's. So I think that's part of the reason why when we look at the drafts from 2012 to 2018, most of your top 5 point producers are going to be in the first round. Absolutely. And I think it's going to stay that way. This is why teams are tanking right now. Because you look, you've got 5 here, 3 here, 1, 2, 5, 6, 3 here, 2 here, 1, 4, 2, 1, 6, 2, 7, 5, 1, 4. All early picks. 2, 4, 1, 7. So there's a reason that we get all excited about the draft. And while, yes, there are the occasional flops in the NHL and players who don't become stars, if you're drafting in the first round, you're likely getting an NHLer. So whenever I hear about people talking about the Rangers and Kakko and Lafreniere, I'm thinking, but they still got NHLers. They're still in the NHL. They're still producing. Why do people obsess on what position they were drafted in? It's one of those oddities. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.